Hi, I'm Jim Knotts, President and CEO of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Welcome to today's virtual reading of the names. 2022 marks the 40th anniversary of the dedication of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. As part of our commemoration, we'll host an in-person reading of the names at the wall from November 7th through 10th, 2022, when all 58,281 names on the wall will be read aloud. In the lead up to that event, we'll be reading names each day online while sharing the photos of these heroes. For our daily virtual reading, the names of the service members will be read by month and day of death between the years 1956 and 1975 in alphabetical order for the given day. We apologize in advance for any mispronunciations. Know that our readers are doing their best to honor these service members. We hope you'll listen and watch each day and share with others as we remember and honor those who gave their lives during the Vietnam War.
Kenneth Dale Adkins, Osvaldo Amodius, Charlie Anders, Philip Russell Anderson, Earl Dubois All, Joseph G. Autorino Jr., Levine John Banks, Oscar Barker Jr., Donald Alban Barnes, Jimmy Woodrow Barton, Charles William Bass, Harley Daniel Beckworth, Snyder Padishal Bembry, Clarence Vereen Beverholt, Dennis Walter Black, Raleigh Lee Bolden, Kenneth Charles Bullock, Jimmy Floyd Boren, Roy Howard Bowling, Jack Allen Bowman, Thomas Glenn Brandeis, Maurice Brooks, William Joseph Brown, Ralph Wayne Brown, William Charles Bullman, Kenneth Edward Ray Birch, Mark Wayne Burchard, Barry Tyson Bernight, William Russell Burton Jr., Alan Hayes Caldwell, Joe Caldwell, Thomas Francis Callahan, Charles Edward Capelli, Megdalio Carballo Garcia, Brian Fitzgerald Carquist, Danny E. Carlton, Joseph Carter Jr., David Rivas Costello, Edward Cecil K.E. Jr., Ruben Garza Chavez, John William Chiella, Ronnie Lee Clark, Richard Grover Cleveland, Charles Mitchell Cohen, John Thomas Cole Jr., Charles Allen Collins, Jackie Randall Combs, Francisco Concepcion Jr., John Milton Cohn, Melvin Eugene Cooks, Francis Joseph Cormier, Donald C. Cornett, Chester Cosgrove, Gary Dean Cox, Max Cecil Cox, Charles Edward Cox, Timothy Allen Crandall, Donald Ellis Crane, Bernard James Creed, Larry Albert Doms, Roger Earl Dalrymple, Buren Ray Davis, Robert Louis Davis, Elwood William Davis Jr., Paul David Derby, Robert Wilbur Deo Jr., Tommy Allen Doak, James Robert Dragati, Emma L. Dressler, Ray L. Duffin, Charles Leroy Eller, Roger Jean Emmerich, Terry Michael Enriquez, Ralph Herman Ernst, James Wilbur Irvin, Gerald Bruce Evans, Robert Jerry Farley Sr., William Alfred Farrell, Francis M. Finnerty Jr., James Lewis Fisher, Ronald Easel Fisher, John David Flanagan, Michael Edward Flannery, Jordan Dwayne Forrester, Melvin Frank Fort, Joseph Patton Fry, George Joseph Fierst, Rudolph Joseph Galarraza, Ryan Jude Gallo, George K. Galloway Jr., Juan Rafael Garcia, Thomas Lawrence Graves, Gerald Lee Grayson, Richard Herschel Green, Robert Earl Green, Norman Eugene Guillaume Jr.,
Melvin Wister Gunter, Otis James Hampton, Jimmy Harris, Daniel Lester Hart, Nicholas Mark Hartman, Richard Thomas Havel, Elva Worrell Henson, Jr., Frederick Charles Herriot, Reynaldo Castillo Hernandez, Larry Leroy Hess, Carl D. Hessel, Jerry Allen Hemer, Joseph Rollins Hilliard, James Roosevelt Hines, Robert Lee Hurst, David Edgar Hofert, Walter DeWayne Hogan, James Edward Holden, Samuel L. Holman, Philip Howell, Dale Francis Hudson, Carl Michael Hume, Paul Edward Hurdle, Leroy Ireland, Dean Alfred Jackson, Alpha Ray Jackson, James Charles Jackson, Thomas James, Harry Francis Yegiowski, Fred Harvey Jenkins, Wilbert Herschel Johnson, Theodore W. Johnson, Jacob Johnson, Harold Joseph Junga, Thomas Keith Camp, Thomas Joseph Killian, Jr., Cecile Wilbert Kittle, Jr., Kenneth Gordon Klein, Leroy John Oliver Kling, Martin C. Knapp, Wayne Edward Kahn, Gerald Anthony Kozakowski, John Thomas Koziol, Duncan Frederick Kruger, Ramon Quaylan Oliveras, Joseph Stephen Lafazo, James L. Lang, Garrett Flores Lee, William Jefferson Lindsay, Vincent Locatelli, Brian Lewis Long, Hal Randolph Long, Henry Thomas Luna, Wayne Thomas Lundell, Charlie Lilas Jr., Jack Dale Lynn, Robert Bailey Markham, John Keith Marshall, Ronald Robert Martin, Guadalupe Martinez, Ronnie Thomas Mathis, Roy Edward May, Glenn Eugene McCammon, Harold Daniel McCarn, Prazel McCullough, William E. McDonald, William Darrell McGrath, George S. McHellen, Willie Davis McNeil, Martin L.B. Mendoza, David Louis Mendoza, Roger Eugene Merck, David Henry Merriam, Palmer Beach Miles, Ronald Allen Miller, Michael J. Miller, Malcolm Edward Millican, Lloyd Joel Monswis, Arthur R. Moody III, Charles Thomas Moore, Jr., Julio R. Morales Gonzalez, Robert Moreno, Edward Joseph Murphy, Jr., Jimmy D. Nakayama, Roger Theodore Nelson, Max E. Nichols, Larry Donald Nichols, Frank John Nostat, Jr., Theophilos Orphanos, Sherman Eldridge Otis, Richard Dean Ott, John Willie Page, Ishmael Hussein Paredes, Agustin Chavez Paredes, Michael Anthony Pastorino, Hubert Jackson Payne,
Ernest David Pernato, Ronald James Perkins, Dwayne Kenneth Peterson, Donald Carl Peterson, Charles Robert Pittenger, Thomas Carmen Pisano, William Andrew Pleasant, James Francis Polensi, Robert Posius, Alan James Ranke, Thomas Allen Reich, Carrie Edward Remouard, Louis Douglas Richardson, Daniel Alexandria Riddick, Howard George Riley, Gerald Francis Rock, Jesse Nicholas Rodriguez, Arturo Cantu Rodriguez, Thomas Franklin Rogers Jr., Clayton George Rogers Jr., Ernest Edward Ross, James Roast, Jr., George Clayton Rowland, Jr., Roy Louis Rice, Jr., Darrell W. Sanders, Richard P. Sawicki, Guy Lawrence Schaefer, Mervyn Schlapp, Jr., John Schleck III, Gerald Joseph Schleichman, Harold Scott, Eugene C. Scott, John Andy Shaw, Matthews Shelton, Martin Dean Shields, Robert S. Shriver, Jr., Edward Lamar Simmons, Roger Allen Shimru, Henry Fonzo Smith, Sidney Courtney M. Smith, Michael Thomas Smith, Gary D. Smith, Norman William Slato, Dennis Eugene Stecker, Charles Thomas Steiner, George Joseph Stevens, Roger Allen Stone, Charles William Story, Robert Eugene Strom, Phineas Ronnie Studdard, Aaron Twill, Jesse Jr. Taylor, Ernest Edward Taylor, Mark Francis Terrell, Richard Paul Tevens, John Wesley Terrell, Norman Eugene Thomas, Larry Preston Thurman, Paul Edward Tolbert, David Torres, Alan Bradford Turner, Lloyd Kenneth Turner, Ethel Tyler, Roger Stanley Urbani, David Michael Van Klett, James Odell Vaughn, Darrell Dean Venga, Miguel de Jesus Vera Duron, Bobby C. Vincent, David Stephen Vollmer, Robert E. Waldvogel, Mac Arthur Ware, Matthew Ware, Neopolis Wigfall, George A. Wilson, Fred Douglas Witchett, John Henry Woody, Joseph Myron Workman, Robert C. Wright, William Clifford Weimer, Jr., James D. Yakeley, Gordon Preston Young, Richard T. Young, Julius Zaparazik.